and Irmin thought about this evening, and it's in honor of the anniversary, and other bands would just call their old mates and play again, and then they are old and they have this Nord lead, this red keyboard, and play. Mm-hmm. And Irmin didn't want to do this. He thought those band members who are still playing, they should play, but himself, he wants to go back to the moment when he started Can, and by then he was a successful composer in the classical field. And so I think he felt like, I would like, when I think about the start and the beginning, I want to be the conductor again. Did I say composer? He was a successful conductor and a composer. So he thought he wanted to combine classical conducted music with all the experience he made with Can. We don't like the sound of a drum set in an orchestral setting, and we don't like classical musicians who try to be rock musicians and are just worse rock musicians. And so we thought, what is it that the orchestra has actually that's different from a rock band, but it still can transport this Can spirit? We started to collect motifs from Can records that we would like to quote. And so I had to listen to all the Can records, and even though I considered myself as a Can fan, I needed like half a year to have my list of 5 pages of parts of Can pieces that I would like to quote. At the same time, Irmin made a list of the quotes he wants to have in this piece. And after a while, the material shaped itself into a quite traditional form. So it was very much like a classical symphony from the 18th century, the form. And we didn't want to force our Can quotes into this form, but they arranged themselves.
We'd like to thank you coming in tonight, and we'd like to dedicate this show to both Jackie Liebetzeit and Mickey Caroli.
they were of that generation, so they had sort of lived through the war directly, as well as experienced the aftermath. And the aftermath for a lot of people of that generation, and particularly for Irmin and Michael Caroli, was of parents who had actually sort of supported the Nazi regime.
And do you think that was in part what prompted Irmin to abandon this world in a kind of hierarchical classical world and start something new?
I think that must have been a factor. Yeah, he did have this fairly conventional career building up. He was pretty successful as a conductor. There's this amazing moment in June 1968, so it's like a month after the Paris May 68 unrest, and Irmin was sort of interested in forming some kind of ensemble to play something beyond sort of classical structured music. He was a friend of this American David Johnson, who was an engineer for Stockhausen, also played the flute. Irmin also knew Holger Schukai from they'd both been on these courses with Stockhausen. Irmin told me he wanted a jazz drummer who was like really good at sort of bebop, modern bop type drumming. And he'd known Jackie Lieberzeit because they'd worked together on some soundtracks. The story is, he rang Jackie saying, "Can you recommend a drummer for this group?" Jackie goes, "Yeah, I'll think of something." And the doorbell goes the next day, and it's Jackie, himself at the door. And also to that meeting, June 1968, Irmin Schmidt's apartment in Cologne, Holger also brings Michael Caroli, who had been a student of his at a finishing school in Switzerland. Not long after that meeting, they get offered a studio space in this castle, Schloss Nürvenich, which is a kind of an old sort of stately home outside Cologne. So they were kind of exploring the space there sonically, and that's where the first recordings were done. As he
When do you think it dawned on them that a singer would be a good idea as a sort of focal point for this work? How did they first bring Malcolm in?
Well, he was an American kind of on the lam from the Vietnam draft. So he'd kind of gone on the hippie trail at that time. He was intending to go through Europe and North Africa down to Iran and India. Hildegard, which is Irmin's wife and the manager of the group for most of their career, had invited Malcolm. He took the invitation, came to Cologne, and sort of almost the same day, got invited to the studio. And they'd recorded the backing track of the track which is Father Cannot Yell, and they sort of played it to him to show him what they were doing, and apparently just stepped up to the mic, did the vocal that you now hear on Monster.
So that was his first gesture in their presence.
Literally just straight in there, yeah. So I think Malcolm was definitely a kind of a catalyst and sort of something that convinced them they could have a really strong presence and a vocal presence. what's amazing about everyone in Can, everyone connected with Can, you know, they've been around a really long time. They are just not interested in the past. You know, they're not interested in this whole rock nostalgia thing that a lot of people, you know, we're in a sort of period of that sort of recapturing the past. And what I love about Can is, you know, now they're just interested in what they're doing now, what the next thing is.
Hasn't been born, yes, it hasn't been born.